Welcome to You Are Here. Today we have a special show. It is the Call Me Kai special, where we take a look at the new 4 CD set out at kevingilbert.com. Joining me for this special show is Mark McCrite once again. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing good. How are you?
All right. So I sent you the Call Me Kai set roughly about a week and a half ago, and you heard the music already before. What this is,
Most of it.
yeah, most of it. And the reason why you've heard it is because through the 80s, Kevin Gilbert, when he about 1985 through 87, when he was between 15 and 19 years old, he went ahead and recorded an album a year. That was his little promise to himself, to record an album a year, and he would give it to friends and family in December as kind of like a Christmas gift, a little holiday treat. So these cassettes have been floating around out there, and the quality is pretty suspect at times. Is really hissy. It's, you got little pops and crackles, and so what we did was we went ahead and took the master tapes and had these mastered by John Cunaberti, and we present these now as a 4 CD set to you. First off, I want to ask Mark, what do you think about the quality of these now that you've heard them in its true fidelity?
Oh, I think it's great. There's a lot of stuff that, like you said, I'm used to hearing like, third generation cassette or something like that. And hearing them actually off the masters, all mastered is really, really great. I mean, it's, yeah, yeah, that was immediately apparent. And I found that I really was able to enjoy the music a lot more.
Really? Okay, so it did make a difference. And it's this music, just like Giraffe and NRG in the 80s, for me personally, never really grabbed me entirely. I got into Kevin Gilbert's music starting with Toy Matinee. So the 80s synth kind of didn't hit me. In doing the Giraffe box set and this set, I got a little bit closer to the songs, and I saw the obviously the true musicality there, everything that was built with them. Um, I think people are going to be amazed when they've heard these previously, and now they're going to hear this quality, and I think they will hear some new sonic elements that were just hidden because of the limitations of MP3s or just bad tape transfers. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get into some of the music from each of the CDs. And I asked Mark to go ahead and choose a couple of tracks from each disc so we can kind of see what his view is on them. And we're going to play a couple of or a few clips, sound clips, and only about a minute and a half long, just to give you an idea. And we're going to give you a sense of what these discs were based off of. Um, to start off, Kevin's voice sounded very, very different. It He sped up the tape many times, and you know that, Mark. You've heard the
Yeah.
tales and the stories on it. And what do you think about his voice?
Um, I mean, you hear that you hear what he's going for in that he had amazing pitch and the phrasing and what have you is very deliberate. And I think that, I obviously I prefer the later material after he kind of like found his voice. But for what he was going for, I thought it was really cool. I've heard in interviews where he talks about how much Bill Bottrell and Pat Leonard were pushing him during Toy Matinee to really deconstruct what it was that he liked about his favorite vocalists and kind of explore what it was that he was doing versus the impact that things had that were his biggest influences. And it's not that he was trying to imitate anyone, but that I think it just things became much richer, much more emotional, much more connected to the lyrics. And I've kind of had this in my own experience. Looking at my favorite vocalist, Kevin, of course, being one of those, where you hear when someone is trying very hard to sing in tune, and then you hear when they're just kind of going for it, and because they're a good singer, they're in tune. And I so that's a big difference. But you also hear evolution on the set. The earlier stuff on the set is definitely, I mean, come on, he sounds younger when he's younger.
Yeah.
And as he moved through it, you can hear more depth and more dynamics and more connection.
Yeah, and lushness in the tracks and everything. And you can also tell that his engineering skills, towards the latter tracks on these, his engineering skills were really coming into place, using a lot more effects, not really sound effects, but just more studio effects and and elements in the studio. A lot of I guess trying to tapping into a bunch of synth sounds that were new at the time. So
Yeah, the arrangements and all of that stuff started really coming together. And I hear it also as he's working with other musicians. I think that music has a certain character when it's someone like doing it all themselves. And it's not that it's worse or better. I mean, I love some, Todd Rundgren, Paul McCartney's first record, a lot of things where people play all the instruments themselves, but there's just kind of a richness and more dimensionality when he's working with other people. So some of these like NRG outtakes and stuff that he did with Stan Cody and some of the other people, really adds another dimension to stuff.
well, let's get into it. Let's get right into it. The first album off of this set is Decent Exposure, and that comes from 1985. And one of the tracks that you sort of highlighted in all this was a tune called Simpler Times. And you want to tell us about why you chose that one?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the arrangement of this one. I thought that I don't. He got into a lot of stuff that is just kind of not my cup of tea, as far as you know tracks that are influenced by like Mr. and Toto and even like very 80s like Scritti Politti kind of stuff, and like it's kind of no wonder that he ended up with Pat Leonard when you hear like a prayer and stuff like that. But I like the ballads, and I thought that like the drum machine programming on this one was really cool. And it also, I mean, it has a particularly great vocal. um, that was one reason that I chose it. You can also hear, hence he has a line where he talks about "forgive me my sins," which kind of reminded me of "congratulate my sins" in a song for a dead friend.
Mhm.
uh, you hear him borrowing from pop songs. The verse is very much like Journey's "Separate Ways," which would have been popular right at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the highlight that isn't featured somewhere else. I mean, probably my favorite thing on here is the Rain Suite, which is also available on the NRG download. And I liked some of the stuff that had appeared on Nuts as well.
All right. Well, let's get into a little bit of Simpler Times. Just play a little clip and see what you're talking about.
Long lost friends, the contract never bends. You sign your name and then the real fun begins.
Journey.
From the start, I was following my heart, but good intentions don't forgive me my sins. Set me free, 'cause what I really need is simpler times. Molding life like sculptors clay, open minds, hanging on each word I say, short white lines, teach me to be brave and strong.
Yeah, the drum machine in that, I think when I put my finger on it, it reminds me of like Mother Stands for Comfort by Kate Bush,
Mm-hmm.
or Mad World by Tears for Fears. It's
Mm-hmm.
like very deliberate and sparse, and I think that's really cool. You also hear the reference to the sculptor, kind of like Tears for Audrey.
Yeah, and you do in a lot of these tracks. What is interesting is you do hear a lot of maybe little vocal lines or lyrics that come from that are placed into songs in the future in other tracks.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's he was always borrowing, always nabbing from himself, possibly from others at times. So it's pretty interesting there. Now, we go into another track on this disc on Decent Exposure from the 1985 disc, Walking in Your Shoes. What brought you to that one? What
This one, I
highlighted?
thought it was cool to hear some of the influences. The intro is very obviously inspired by "Leave It" by Yes,
Uh-huh.
like this, really insane, a cappella harmony, lots of harmony vocals, and then it goes into like a keyboard sequence part that reminds me of the song "Changes" by Yes from the
Yeah.
same record, 90125, and but it's interesting, you can really date it by the keyboard sounds. He's using like very stock DX7 patches, like the synth bells, and you immediately notice that the bass is totally the same bass that's used in all the Seinfeld cues. And
Yeah.
so so anyway, and the sax, interesting choice for an element. I really like it at the end when it starts doubling the bass. It's like kind of almost like Zappa-esque, but it's cool.
All right, let's get into a little bit of that.
I can see you, you see through me while I'm walking in your shoes.
Amen. We're trying. Praise God. She's on the phone, and we're going to talk to her in just a moment. So you just hold tight. Reverend Eastman's wife, Sister Eastman, is on the phone, and she's going to talk to us, amen, about some things that are important to her. Hello? Hello? Yes. Hi, Sister Brown. How are you?
What did I do to make you look at me this way? Some false intent, you read into each word I say.
All right, there. Some Walking in Your Shoes for you from Decent Exposure. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, that one. It's definitely the little doot, doot, doot. I mean, it takes you back down to 1985, definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is captured here from the era. So when you do put on these discs, I mean, you will go back to the 80s. I mean, just there's so many songs when you even skipping around that it'll remind you of another time of your life, definitely. Um, Sometimes Why is the 1986 album that was released from him, or that was actually, given out in tapes. And that's where we're at next. Now, you can start to, for me, I hear a big shift in his music in from 85 to 86. 85 kind of had the NRG feel, the leftover, the intro into the studio. And 86 seemed to kind of propel him forward more with production. And from talking with the Draft guys and with Doug Hopping over at TRS and later Census Studios, where they recorded all these, they said, Kevin was eavesdropping more on sessions and kind of tapping into what other people were doing and doing his own thing off of that. So how do you feel about the transition between Decent Exposure into Sometimes Why?
Biggest thing that I hear is I just hear much stronger, much more evolved songwriting. I chose two songs. It was actually difficult. God's Been Tapping My Phone is one of my favorite songs that he's written. So young, but I didn't choose that because there's already a version on Nuts, and I actually prefer that one to the one that's on here. But
Really?
it's cool to hear where it started.
Now, why do you
And
prefer the Nuts version, though? What's different between the two that you
just the
prefer?
vocal
Okay.
and the fact that it's like real piano as
Yeah.
opposed to like all programmed instruments.
Okay.
If he would have redone it with a full band, I think it would have been great. And I can say that of a lot of this stuff. I mean, when he would take one of these older songs, like the beginning of Tired Old Man, or Image Maker and Staring Into Nothing, even when stuff that's not on here, like The World Just Gets Smaller, it's like it just like took on this whole new life for me. And I listened to this collection with that kind of ear, thinking like, you know, learning to listen for the song and for what he was trying to do. And there's just so much great stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, and to think that in years following, would some of these tracks have been revisited and expanded? And
Yeah.
that's when you listen to this set, that's kind of always playing in your mind, because you do hear songs like "Staring Into Nothing" that appear twice in two different versions on this set, that was later used in the Shaming of the True, and you hear how it was used in the Shaming, you hear how it was used in the Call Me Kai set, and you see that evolution and that process. So to think of
Well,
like what he could have done with some of these songs even in the future is mind-boggling.
that one's really interesting too, because it's like the first version of it is
Staring Into
actually
Nothing.
more, yeah, is actually more like the Shaming version than the second version.
Yeah.
Because I think he kind of went more muso, more complex chords and that kind of stuff. And when he got to when he got to Shaming, he was trying to peel away some of that prog influence and strip things down and make them more in your
Yes.
face. And it was just interesting. He went right back to where it started.
I know. That's good. All right, so now back to Sometimes Why. This is Child in Your Arms. Let's popped out a little clip right here to see what you thought about this.
But I don't know what it says to you, so I will say the words you've come to expect from me. We'll both wish for change, 'cause we're not where we thought we'd be by now. Don't be scared now, I'm only a child in your arms. It's alright now, I'm only a child in your arms. Don't be scared now, I'm only a child in your arms. Oh, hold you close, and you're only a child in my arms. In my arms, hold me now.
That one's just, I really like the song.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to choose all like power ballads,
No, it's good.
but it reminds me a lot of Holding On with Both Hands
Mhm.
from the Giraffe record. There's actually another set or another song on this set called Another Day that's right in the same vein. But
Mhm.
I think the vocal is amazing. The production is nice on
Yes,
this one. It's
definitely.
really it builds really nicely.
Yes. No, that would have been one of my choices. And just so people know, I kind of chose not to really pick a lot of songs in our little set here, because I've lived with these songs for, I mean, a couple decades, and I wanted to get your feel from it, because you can formulate your wording better on this stuff. And I just think it's nice to hear how you accept it now, after hearing, like I said, the sound difference, because that does make I can't sell it enough with that. The clarity on these sets are just, it's immense. um it brings us to Tired Old Man, the Tired Old Man suite. Now this is a very complex and uh multifaceted track, in that it saw its debut here on Sometimes Why, but then it got life, and it breathed life through live sets in Giraffe. And Giraffe took this song, and they kind of Kevin kind of came up with a different middle section for when they played live. And the cool thing on this set is that you get a few of those different middle sections in the different tracks. So it's kind of difficult to explain it. You sort of have to get into this set to see what we're going to be talking about, and we don't want to confuse you too much. But um, why don't you give me your view on the Sometimes Why version of of the Tired Old Man suite, Mark?
I kind of see that it in a way as being definitive in that this it really feels completely thought out start to end. It's really nice. I like listening to this one. Of course, there again, I prefer hearing his redone version that showed up on Nuts. But that's just for the first part. It's a shame that he didn't redo the whole thing at some point. But I kind of look at this as like, if Shaming of the True is his Tommy, this is his quick one while it's away, or while he's away, where it's like the mini rock opera.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see him do something so ambitious so early. And actually the Rain suite from NRG is the same kind of thing. But man, the Terpsichorian, great. The Terpsichorian part is really cool. There are two different versions on Mixbag, one of them called Terpsichorian and one of them called Yoyoyo, and you can actually, if you put together a playlist, you can actually just insert those in and see kind of how the whole thing goes together. I personally like the one that's stitched together as the suite the best, but the other two are pretty cool too.
And we'll get into one of the other ones after, and we'll kind of explain that then, because I have a little more explanation on that. So let's get to Tired Old Man from the Sometimes Why 1986 disc.
I've lived my life alone. It's never been that bad, but I wish my work were done. A puppet carved from wood, he will be my son, whom I will call the only one. I wish you could really share my tired old man. Speak, my son, oh, speak to me. Life is wonderful, I wish you could see. I wish you could really share my life. I wish you could really share my love.
And that's just a small portion of it, because this thing goes on, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, here's an interesting thing. Now, we talk about how Kevin recycled songs, or he used them later on in his career and everything like that. Something that a lot of people don't know, I don't know if you know, the Tired Old Man version that you're talking about that appeared on Nuts, that was actually the first song that was completed for Thud. So that version is the complete version that he originally made for Thud. And it was also the first song that he took away from Thud. So once he made the song and then started to make the track lists for Thud, put it in there and then took it right out. So
it's interesting. I mean, it has such a different vibe with the Thud, because it's with this one, now you know what it's like to live, and then you kind of get this big extended instrumental that's really dramatic, and then it comes back and actually puts a last verse on it, and that was really cool. But in the, I guess what we call the Thud version now, is I thought it was interesting that, first of all, because the vocal is more mature, he actually sounds like a tired old man.
Yeah.
And at the very end, when he says, "Now you know what it's like to live," ending on that melancholy note, that like, you know what it's like to live, and it's a melancholy, moody thing, I thought was just genius. It very much reminded me of the end of the rock opera in Who Knows Where You'll Go, and it descends into chaos,
Yep. That's just It just puts it
Yeah.
there. Now we were talking about in some of these tracks that they could have seen life in the future, and I forgot to mention that one of the first song you chose, "Simpler Times," from the Decent Exposure album, that was grabbed and was tried in The Shaming of the True.
Really?
It was
I
reworked.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's a playlist that Kevin had, and with the lyrics written and everything, and he wrote it down to include Simpler Times. So I don't know
Yeah, I could see doing that thematically.
unfortunately, he didn't sit down and redo it. So all it is that version we have to go with in theory. So maybe one day we'll release that track list and people can try to intertwine it with, the other Shaming of the True stuff. Now, okay, so Sometimes Why. I'm sticking on this album a little bit because we were talking about Shaming of the True. And in this 4 CD set, you do revisit, or you do get introduced to songs that later became parts of the Shaming of the True. And with Sometimes Why, we get the first track of Image Maker. So I wanted to play a little bit of that because that was later put into Giraffe, and then it was in the Shaming of the True. But this version, as well as a lot of versions, I don't know if you really headsetted it and did an A/B comparison with the NRG tracks and some of the tracks from NRG here. There are a little bit of variances in mixes and with sonic elements in it, Mark. So I don't know if you did catch on to that. So while there are a lot of familiar tracks on here that you would say, wow, I see that in NRG, when you put them up together, they don't really match. So there might be a little bit of, mixing differences, but there are differences. So I wanted to play a little bit of Image Maker. That way you guys can hear just how it kind of started. Let me see. Let me grab that.
Sitting pretty on my chair. My two-way mirror shields the glare. Narcissist bows in useless prayer. This franchise deal needs repair. Image maker, come to me. Makes me think that I should be. I am only what you see, and you're wanting more.
What do you think of that version in comparison to Giraffe's version, in comparison to Shaming of the True?
Well, they are all very similar. I mean, I think isn't the main difference the marimba sound in
Yeah.
the second verse?
Yeah.
That was where you started, kind of like Tears for Fears change.
Yes.
And then obviously he added the sort of the vocals in
Yeah.
the bridge section later. But I mean, it's pretty remarkable actually how close he got to the final version or the final vision for the song in the first demo, and I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, I could have easily chosen one of those as one of the tracks to highlight, but I kind of wanted to try and stick with stuff that was that people hadn't heard before, or things
totally.
that were new. But yeah, that one, I thought it was really cool. I like that marimba thing.
Yeah, it adds a different element. And what's cool is when people get these discs and they load them up into their players, media players, or what have you, MP3s, and it would be interesting to just kind of back to back them, all the different versions, because when you do that, I mean, that's basically how I formulate these compilations, having to compare them all. And when you do that, you will just hear the differences. Because if you just put it on for the first time and you say, oh, I've heard Staring Into Nothing before, I've heard Image Maker before, you may not hear some things that are new to you. So you do definitely have to sit with these. And the cool thing about these 4 CDs is that not only is it just packed, I'm not trying to sell it here, it's something that you can put one disc on and live with that disc for a while. and really get into and unpack all the elements, or you can treat it just as typical 80s music, pop it on and just have it on in the background. It kind of has that kind of play where it has a little bit of that sophistication, but also a little bit of that beat where you can just phase out and just be yourself on it.
Well,
So
like you said, I think the cool thing about it is that, it's not like one collection. This is 4 distinct albums that
right.
he put together. Um, and this is the way that he envisioned it. This is the sequencing. This is, they were conceived that way. And so they really are, each one of them, a complete experience.
And it's good. That's a good place to stop down right now and talk about a little bit about how these were conceived. Now, um, when Kevin passed away, the estate went under the guise of only releasing material that Kevin would have wanted released, and only releasing things that he would have been proud of to release. At the time, he said, "I'm not going to release the Giraffe albums. I'm not going to release this material or what have you." Now, through the years, Kevin, as we look at it, would have seen the music industry dynamic change. Back then, there weren't in the mid 90s, there wasn't a push for 20th anniversary collections and 30th anniversary collections. I mean, they weren't heard of then. So as the years pass by, and we've sat and talked about these things, and we came to the realization that, what would we be telling Kevin right now? How would we be, trying to formulate his career and what he would be doing? Would he be doing soundtrack work? Would he be working with other bands? Would he be like Steven Wilson, like we've talked about? Would he be, producing all these retro packages? Who knows? But for his solo career, one thing that he might be jumping back into is some of his back catalog, some of his unreleased and demoed material, and putting it out there to give his fans and kind of a little tap into his mind back then, and to generate funds so that he can continue doing current music or projects.
I
So
think also it's a matter of cleaning up what's out there. These songs are out there floating around in not great quality, and I don't think he would
yeah,
like that.
yeah, no, and it's amazing the tales that get told of these songs when you hear, and it's not to detract from it. It's understandable that people don't know the history of these songs. So you hear one thing of a song and it has a different life on the internet. And by the time it comes back to someone who worked on the song, they go, that wasn't about that song at all. So in putting this set together, we just wanted to get it out there so that people can have these songs and understand how Kevin's songwriting career formulated and the really the formation of it, because this set does it. And the unfortunate thing is there's not a lot of notes on this material, because Kevin had done these and didn't really have them set for release. There were no liner notes. There's very, very few notes about it, as far as even the musicians on it and the instrumentation. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to put as much and pack as much into it. So when you guys get it, it's a nice little digipack. It opens up into what looks like the actual master tapes. And how we did that is, this is supposed to be a studio master tape. So if anybody's been in a studio with multi-tracks, these are floating around them, or they used to be. So we took Kevin's actual writings from the master tracks, and that's how we did all the artwork. So this is just a little mini representation of everything that would be in Kevin's Call Me Kai era. Now, Call Me Kai went through a lot of, because it's through 4 albums, it went through a lot of different eras of Kevin's life. And one of those was at the time he was keyboard player for Eddie Money's band. And that was in 1987, 86, 87. So what do you think about that? Like, when you heard Kevin was a keyboard player in Eddie Money's band, did you know at the time back in 86, 87, or was it you found out afterwards?
I found out afterwards, but I mean, this is another. You and I haven't actually talked about this, but in the last podcast, I talked about how um, it seemed like I kept running into his name, or I kept running into him at various points in my life through different just different avenues, different people. And one of the things was the studio that we recorded our first couple of Rocket Scientist records at. Eddie Money did his demos there at the same time, which was at this time. So I don't know if he was playing on the demos or if he was just touring with them or what, but that's like another weird overlap.
Yeah, just a
Which
lot of
is
connections.
it's a studio called Woodcliff in Sherman Oaks, and he actually the guy who owns it, Frank Rosato, is the guy who finished mixing Spock's Beard, Beware of Darkness when Kevin had gotten halfway through it before he passed away.
Yeah, so he was in Eddie
Small
Money's.
world.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a small world. All the connections, just it's when you pull out the family tree, the Kevin Gilbert family tree, and it's like a broken glass because everything just connects everywhere. It's just a big spider web. So he was with Eddie Money's band, and he had mixed results with that. He didn't want to be out there doing typical top 40, uh, I guess arena rock also type of stuff. So he was in the studio doing this stuff, and that brings us up to Point Blank, the 1987 album. And one of the offshoots before Giraffe, through Kai Gilbert, was a little collective called Cspot Run. And that was made up of mainly Stan Cody and Kevin Gilbert and, one or two other players here and there, including J. Scott Smith at times from Giraffe. Now, they had an interesting tap into get their song into a soundtrack, Night of the Creeps. And they released a song called Nightmares with Martha Davis on lead vocals. Have you heard that one, Mark?
Yeah, that's actually on YouTube. You can find it.
Yeah, it's out there, and I think
with
it's
Martha's vocal.
Yeah, with Martha's vocals. I think it's on one of her greatest hits, also a 3 CD set or something that she has. And for this Point Blank CD, you chose Nightmares as one of the tracks to play. Now, this version isn't the Martha Davis version. Obviously, it's the one with Kevin Gilbert singing on it. And what we heard from Stan Cody in the Giraffe special is that he believes that Kevin actually erased Martha's vocals and just sang over it, but who knows if that's really true. Hopefully it's true. That's kind of a cool little Kevin story. But now, why did you choose this song?
Well, because I thought the story you just told was interesting. I knew all of that stuff, and I also chose it because Stan Cody's amazing on this. The solos, like Alan Holdsworth, it's just awesome. I wish Kevin did not sing it with sped up vocals, but like you said, he's just kind of blowing over what Martha Davis had done, so it was in her key. But yeah, I mean, I chose it because I thought that whole thing was really cool, and Stan in particular. I had kind of like you said, the story of what these albums are. It's good to finally get a definitive answer because, I think Point Blank was the first one of these collections that I heard. And because of Nightmares, that kind of got generalized to, oh, these are all songs that Kevin was writing to try to sell to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how I got to know all of these songs, which I don't think is necessarily the truth. I think they're, he happened to place that in a movie from, with Martha Davis, but
anyway, and those are the tales that I say that they breathe life on, and they just keep going, and that's why we're releasing some of this stuff to like kill those tales.
And another weird point, the world just gets smaller, is I was working with Paul Ill on a project at Line 6. We were making a bass product, and he was consulting on some stuff and writing some documentation and all that kind of stuff. And he was telling me he was playing with Martha Davis at the time. This is like back in like 2010-ish. And so it's like, yeah, well, there,
it always connects somehow.
Yeah.
All right. So you spoke of the Nightmares section with Stan Cody. And so let's get a little...
Oh, I also chose it because at the very end of the song, he humorously uses the exact samples that were used in Owner of a Lonely Heart. Back to 90125 again.
Well, here you go. Let's hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think it was 30 Years by UK where Alan Holdsworth was doing that same kind of, I mean, Holdsworth does that kind of like interesting bends and what have you, but Stan was definitely channeling him, or at least that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, no, that one is great in that section right there. I had to play the solo section just because I mean it is just sweet. And speaking of sweet, let's go to Suits Me Fine. That was a nice little awkward segue. What brought you to this song, Suits Me Fine?
This one, not necessarily my favorite song. I think I'd probably choose Danaray if I was choosing like my favorites, but Suits Me Fine was really interesting because I was thinking to myself as I heard it, there's something about this that feels familiar. And then I realized that, you know, it starts out with going back and forth between two chords, and then it goes into a very straight rock section. And it feels like it's an early version of Shadow Self. And it's people will probably listen to it and think that I'm insane. But if you listen to the verse, I realize it's not the same chords, it's not in the same time signature even, but it's the same kind of vibe. And then when it gets into the middle section, I'm not talking about the thud Shadow Self, I'm talking about the bonus, the version of Shadow Self that's on thud, where there's a lot of sequenced program keyboards and what have you. And instead of the sort of Steely Dan with the groovy bass and the Wurlitzer breakdown section of You Will Become Me, it's a real straight ahead, like kind of Toto rock section. And it's pretty much the same thing and Suits Me Fine with different lyrics. And I thought that was really fascinating. So that's why I chose this one.
All right, let's get to it.
Cigarettes on the table, shoes under the bed. Don't want explanation, something's better left unsaid.
So that's like the I'm a sick man kind of thing.
I can try to tear it down, but we're only building tension. The truth is, baby, that just suits me fine. That just suits me fine. Yeah.
The drum fill.
Twice as many headaches, twice as many showers, twice as many work nights till the early morning hours. First you want commitment.
Right. And that is Suits Me Fine. That is on the DVD for Giraffe in the Giraffe set. They do that live. So that's the one that Michael Abowd couldn't remember doing. So, and they did. That's one thing from this set is that some of these songs were performed by Giraffe. They weren't recorded by Giraffe. Some of the Giraffe members were present in the recording sessions, but they didn't actually live life as a Giraffe song, but they saw life as in the Giraffe's live sets. So that's a pretty cool takeaway from these, because if you have the Giraffe 3 CD set or 2 CD, 1 DVD, then in that DVD you will see some of these songs played, like the Puppet, or like Tired Old Man, Sweet, Suits Me Fine. So definitely go out and get that, because everything intertwines. That's just how Kevin Gilbert's world is. Now, one of the songs that I chose, I wanted to play from Point Blank, or a little snippet of it, is One Bad Habit. And that just I don't even know why. It just has some like little naughty guitar lick in it or something, and it's just one that I want people to hear and take with them.
This one I liked in particular because I think it's the only one of the only tracks that uses acoustic guitar. Tired Old Man does too, but really nice and gives it like a much more organic feel than the typical 80s stuff.
And that's how you can feel in Point Blank, the 1987 disc, is that's where you start feeling the warmth and stuff and getting a little bit out of that synthy era. Let's see about this.
The intro guitar bit reminds me a lot of Waiting for the Rain.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some high open piano voicings that come in that remind me a lot of Welcome Home.
Yeah, and you can just like you said that just you can hear the song, the track breathe. You know, it's the first two discs, Decent Exposure, Sometimes Why. You can hear a lot of Kevin living in the studio, trying to throw in a bunch of elements, a bunch of everything he could put into a song at times. And it seems to me that with Point Blank onwards, he decided to just let things live a little bit and experiment a little less with things and just try to flesh a little bit more of the sections out. Would you get that too?
Yeah, totally.
It's great. Now, this CD set was originally going to be a 3 CD set. And at the 11th hour, probably about a little over 2 months ago, I finished some of my research on the album Mixed Bag. Now, Mixed Bag was a collection of songs from 1984 through 87 that Kevin assembled and gave out to friends and relatives. But it was a little bit of a different collection. It was some more of some leftovers here and there and some instrumental tunes. And this is where we actually see Kevin jumping into the soundtrack and scoring field a bit. And for those people who don't know, Kevin made a significant amount of his music career from doing scoring and soundtrack work. So this is where you get the seeds of it. And one track that you chose from Mixed Bag is Sometimes Why. Now, it's going to confuse people because there's an album called Sometimes Why, and this track, Sometimes Why, is on the album Mixed Bag, and it has nothing to do with Sometimes Why.
Yeah, it's actually the song Lark's Tongues in Aspic by King Crimson is not on the album Lark's Tongues in Aspic. And the song Face Dances by Pete Townsend is not on the Who album Face Dances. So, there's a precedent.
Yes. Now, what was your why did this track stand out? Because it's melancholy, it's very casual.
There again, I mean, I'm choosing the slower ballad kind of stuff. This one actually, it's just a really nice composition, and it just kind of spoke to me. I'm really into Miyazaki movies. It's like animated movies from Japan, kind of like the Disney of Japan. But anyway, their soundtracks are amazing, and this reminds me of some of that kind of stuff, and that's why I chose it.
All right, let's hear a little bit of it. And one of the reasons why I'm glad you chose this one and to play this is because people will get to hear Kevin's piano work and
yeah, and he definitely had a style as a pianist, and I thought this one, not it's more than just kind of a little instrumental bit. It really is like his signature is all over this.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some of that. You know what's kind of odd is I was listening to it that time. It always had a familiar sound to me, and I don't know if, like I said, it's just me listening to these tracks over and over throughout the years and thinking I've heard it before. But it almost has a sound and this is just a random pop culture reference, but it sounds like the ending song on the movie First Blood. If everyone pauses right now and goes and checks out First Blood, the ending song when Sylvester Stallone's walking out, that it kind of has that reference to it to me.
Yeah, well, the other and I was mentioning a Miyazaki thing. It's the theme from Castle in the Sky.
Oh, there you
So
go.
I'll send you a link to that one.
Yeah, see, so it's everywhere.
Send me your link. I'll send you mine.
Yeah, we'll meet somewhere in between there. Now comes the part where we revisit something we talked about earlier. Terpsichorian we talked about earlier, which was in Tired Old Man Suite. And this is where it gets confusing, because you'll have to play along at home once you get your discs, and you'll have to, go, okay, well, they're talking about this song here, but they're also saying that it matches over here and it was from over here. So you're going to have a scorecard definitely with all this stuff. But in Tired Old Man Suite, which appears in sometimes Y, in the suite, there's a track called Terpsichorian. Now, this is where it's a little confusing. That's where this special comes in, and we kind of have to explain things. On the packaging, we used Kevin's actual writing. Now, that's not technically what the tracks are called. So when you put your CDs into your players and you go ahead and download these songs onto your computers or what have you, your MP3 players, or just in your CD players, it will come up with the CD name. And those are the actual CD names. So like Staring Into Nothing, from Decent Exposure, we call it Staring Into Nothing 1985. Staring Into Nothing 1987, and so on and so forth. Now, Terpsichorian inside the Tired Old Man Suite, as Mark mentioned, went through a few different variations. In Mixed Bag, there's Terpsichorian 2. And that's what that track is called, Terpsichorian 2. Now, there's also a track called Yoyoyo. And when I looked at this track, Yoyoyo, for years, I always thought this was just a joke track. What is this, Yoyoyo? I mean, the title's Yoyoyo. Come on. So when I really got involved in deciphering what the heck these were, the realization was mind-blowing. Yo-Yo-Yo was an incarnation of the middle section of Tired Old Man Suite. Yo-Yo-Yo was a version that they wanted to incorporate, Giraffe did, into their live shows. But they didn't use this version. So this is an unused version that was geared at being in the live set. And you chose this because it has those weird connections, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, the weird part about, like I said, this set, you can grab this Yo-Yo-Yo track, you can cut it and splice it into the Tired Old Man Suite, and now you have a whole new track.
Right.
With a whole new vibe. So
I also noted there, two of the other things I noticed when listening to this is there's like a sampled vocal bit in it that's very much like the
Yes.
da at the beginning of All Because of You, from Giraffe, and it's also sounds to me like that's kind of inspired by some of the stuff on Todd Rundgren's a cappella.
Yeah, so it's great that you catch on those elements and stuff like that, because that's what I want people to do when they listen to this set, is when you hear this stuff, go like, okay, Kevin was probably playing through this in the 80s also.
Yeah.
All right, a little bit of Yo-Yo-Yo. So
Yeah.
it has a weird name, and it is a weird song, but it does fit. Have you tried to edit it into Tired
I
Old Man
haven't done it
Sweet?
yet.
No, I did, of
I
course.
will.
Yeah, I did, and I don't know if I prefer that version or not. It's really, I go back and forth with some of these versions of which I prefer and which I don't. It kind of depends on the project I'm working at the time. So sometimes I want to hear the the goofiness of the 80s. So I love this stuff, and sometimes I want to hear a little bit more seriousness of the mid 90s. So it's a pretty trippy thing you can do with Kevin's music. Um, well, that pretty much wraps up kind of what we're talking about with the entire Call Me Kai thing. Did you want to add anything else about this set? What else? What else is in here? There's photos, just so people know. When you pull out the disc from these, when you pull out the discs, and like I said, they're made to look like little reels. Um, there's wording behind the discs. There's images. There's some photos of Kevin that we uncovered. Actually, some of it was recently. So there's photos and what have you. As I said, there's not much to find from this era, but we tried to pack it with what we could give you. Mark, you
Oh,
got anything else?
just a random thing. The song "Suitcase Living" is wait, is it "Suitcase Living"? No, it's "Carpet Man."
Carpetman, yes.
Is a it's a Fifth Dimension cover,
Uh-huh.
written by Jimmy Webb, the guy that wrote like MacArthur Park and uh, uh, what's the Glenn Campbell song, "Wichita Lineman."
Uh-huh.
So really an odd choice, but it kind of works in the in the flow of this collection. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I it was really fun rediscovering all of this stuff and really kind of just getting really deep into it. I gained a healthy appreciation for it, and there's a lot of tracks I'm going to be going back to a lot.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, this is going to be sitting in a lot of people's players for a long time. It's a lot of content, and it's priced right. And last thing I'm going to say about any of this stuff is, um, one of the reasons why this was released was for the fans, and so that fans can complete a big chunk of the Kevin Gilbert history and discography. Now, it's not a sales pitch that we're trying to say, go and buy these now, because they will not last. A lot of the physical media is being phased out at kevingilbert.com. And that's just, as you know, Mark, the world we live in right now. A lot of physical media is not being produced anymore because a lot of physical media is not being purchased anymore. Now, there's people on the other side of the spectrum who they will not get downloads. They will not buy, anything unless it's a in their hand physical product. I'm pretty much one of those types also, but when it comes down to it, the music is what matters to me, and as long as I can hear it, and if it's released, I'll get it. And so, kevingilbert.com, a lot of these releases, they're considered boutique releases for the fans. Not many are produced, and it's strictly so that fans can have a hard copy to keep with them, hopefully forever. So, with that, we just want to say, grab what you can when it's released, because we don't know when it will go out of sale, out of stock, and not be for sale anymore. So I'm grateful that this set is finally released, because we have been working on it for years upon years, and it's just something that I think everybody will be able to put on their shelf, on their Kevin Gilbert line there, and be able to smile and be happy about, right?
Yeah, and thank you so much. I mean, thanks to you, the estate, everything, just for keeping Kevin's legacy alive, and letting people experience some of this stuff. It's obviously a labor of love, and it's much appreciated.
Oh yeah, well thanks. And it's a lot of this stuff, I have access to it because this is, part of what I do here. But it's not a reality to me until I can talk about it with the fans, because or else it's just sitting in the collection over here. So
Yeah.
being able to release it is a load off of my shoulders, because it's just I'm happy that everyone can have it and hear it in the way that it's supposed to be heard, and not, crappy cassette version. So, well, that's it. I guess we'll
right.
see you next time you are here.